sport, if you will. You can kind of see what I'm saying. We have to travel these roads by ourselves, in a sense. And don't get me wrong, there's a certain place where people can travel with you too, but there comes a time where that inner working begins to happen. And when that inner working begins to happen, then things start to fall off because it's not so much about the majority as it is about the tabernacle experience, the tabernacling, because that's where the true change comes in at. You know, I hope I can. This is just, I'm talking to myself this morning. Y'all are just listening, okay? So that's where the real change comes in because, like I've said many a times before, people's come into the church house with a changed heart. People had a changed heart long before they come into the church house. What that tells me is they had a tabernacling experience with God somewhere out there where everything, there wasn't the majority, it was just a one-on-one experience, an intimate time of tabernacling with him, where a relationship was built, a relationship strong enough, comforting enough, and serious enough with authority to where you bowed down to that whatever it is. You submitted to that. And what I'm hoping to get at is that's where the true unity comes in at, is them tabernacling times, is because that brings us to that next level of authority. You know, because if we can't take care of ourselves, we sure can't take care of other people. You know, it's just the truth of it. And, you know, and I deal with that. You know, we all have our battles every day. If we went through this room and asked each and every one of you could tell me probably a struggle you're facing today. You know, it's natural. But the problem is, and for me, it's not them struggles. It's, do I know who I am in Him in order to continue on this journey that He has me on without letting these outside distractions enter my mind and my heart and knock me off the course. You see, because if you walk the path, you're following the law. And if you follow the law, nothing can come against you that's unlawful because you hold that authority. It's like when God created man, He has authority over that because He created that. So no matter through this whole walk of life, anything outside of Him has no authority over that, including me. You know, I don't have no authority over my true ownership. The Creator owns this vessel. And He owns every right to it. Yes, I get to make decisions. But there's consequences for them decisions. Even if they ain't in Sequoia County Courthouse, there's consequences for my decisions here and here. And what I've learned is them consequences are far more tough than them consequences because there's a torment. You know, I see it as the gnashing of the teeth, the weeping and the gnashing. You know, there's just such torment that's taking place within here and here when you're not following that path. It's that simple. And the thing of it is I know when I'm drifting off that path. And it does something to me here and here. You know, and the reason it does something, it goes back to, like I said, that reverence. When you have such a reverence for the Creator, you don't do anything to disrespect or hurt per se. Not that you could, but you don't do anything out of disrespect because you don't want to affect that relationship that you have. Not that you would affect it. I'm trying to explain this the best I can. I've done that with Rachel's grandpa. You know, she would still continue to do things, but she would do it far enough away from him where it wouldn't affect him too much. Still didn't make it right because it was still doing things. But it justified it for her. And it's the same way with me. If we do things where it's like, well, that ain't that bad. But in my heart and in my mind, I'm not okay with it. But I've justified it because my flesh you see what I mean? There's this battle going on, this great battle taking place within you. And you have these survival instincts. You're in survival mode because something is trying to kill you. You're dying. This old man is dying. And everything within you is trying to keep that thing alive. Survival instincts come in. That's why we reach out for outside foreign substances. That's why we reach out for devices and things to fill that void where we know that we are being took out in that place. And it hinders us. I'm just laying all this out here because there's a great work taking place within us. It's not so much that big show where, we see that it's taking place within a people right now, and it's behind the scenes. It's in their hearts, in their minds. And it's a battle. But anyways, I thank God for this day. What you're supposed to say in it. Get back to the preacher talk. Hey, it's a reality, though. You know what I mean? We come here this morning. We come here this morning because there's something in your heart that has tied us together. Because we're all saying, "Hey, we see the same thing. We're hearing what you hear," and that's where I draw strength from. Because what God is, or what's being revealed to me is not so much mainstream, and I need a witness. We need a witness in the earth. And when things these things that happen to you outside of these gathering places, because that's where your experience is really happening. This right here is a perfect example. It was like the foundation had been laid for all of these years building up of however God moves. However, we didn't recognize it, Wadey. We learned, we knew about the fire. We knew about this stuff. God had revealed it to us. But building up to it, all this thing was to this day where he showed himself in a fire. You see what I'm saying? And what made that real was all of them experiences in the past. Building up to that day when he revealed himself and you couldn't deny it. You see what I'm saying? It was all them experiences that made that manifestation real. It was faith, if you can hear what I'm saying. Faith is what brings this to reality. Because if you don't believe it, and if it's not in your heart, if it's not in your mind, if he hasn't dropped it in your spirit, it's not real to you. And if you try to create it, it's a false image. You can see what Christianity looks like, and you can try to recreate it. But if you recreate it, you're creating another golden calf. But if it's something that's real in your spirit, that he's given you a vision to walk out, and you begin to go after it and manifest it, it's a manifestation of his glory. And that's where, Daisy, if we can, we'll go to Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. Very popular verse. I got that down. You ever hear them preachers say, "This is one of my favorite verses right here"? So that's blasphemy. All right. Very famous verse here. Where there is no vision, the people will perish. Very famous verse. We all know that. Where there is no vision, people will perish. This is the word of the Lord. You've got to have a vision within you. And I believe that God has dropped that vision in everybody. It's our own understanding that keeps us in the way from being able to walk out that vision. Fear, all these different things of how can I walk that out? I'll never forget, and I'll share a quick story with you. Before I got sober, however long ago it was, I carried a little backpack around with me. You know how it is. A little duffel bag, change of clothes, good to go. And but I carried a Bible with me in that little duffel bag, just for, you know what I mean. I was doing drugs every night and drinking, but that Bible, whatever, that was my safety net. You know what I mean? I didn't read it, nothing, but for whatever reason, that little book in that bag was my last little link to God. In my mind. So I remember, I wouldn't let Aaron might be the only brother. I'm not Aaron. You're the only one I can relate with. I wouldn't let certain things touch the Bible. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't right. I respected that thing, man. Even in the midst of the darkness, that thing held that power. In the midst of it, held that power. And I would sit there one night, and I remember one night I opened that thing, and God was really talking to me. Listen to me. God was talking to me in the midst of that darkness, in the midst of tinfoil laying out and straws laying out, brother. God was right there in the midst of that world. And he was speaking to me and revealing himself to me. And what do you do with that? You can't tell the people around you. Hey, God's revealing himself to me right now. You have to deal with it. And there comes the torment. What do you do when God shows up in your life and all your world reveal is darkness? You fall like a dead man. And you know what I mean? How do you operate? He takes all of that away from you. I remember I was disappointed because I had so much money invested in these drugs. And it didn't hold no value to me anymore. I mean, I was like, you just ruined my night. Yeah, I remember that. And I respect that now. Because it showed me what power is available, how much power is really there. That in that world he showed up. And what he told me, he said, you're going to be preaching to people. Honest, I've told y'all this before, maybe a long time ago. But he said, you're going to be speaking to people. And I knew I knew it was real. I knew it. It witnessed to that spirit within me. I knew he wasn't lying. You know what I mean? But and I pictured myself, the only church I'd ever been to is Muldrow, Assembly of God, I think. And they got a real big fancy church, with them steps that goes up like that all around, and big deal. And I seen myself standing up there like this big crowd of people and whatnot. And it was, but I knew that was real. And I remember thinking to myself, what would it take for that to actually manifest? You know what I mean? Imagine the road that I'm going to have to walk to get to that point. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just go down to Muldrow First Assembly and say, can I preach Sunday morning? Especially with an old duffel bag with some straws hanging out the side. But I had a word from God. You know what I'm saying? I had a revelation. They should have let me up there that morning, right? I mean, you see what I'm saying? There was a revealing of God. And so, so I seen that. And I knew that was real. So I thought, first, you got to sober up. That's step one. That wasn't in my vision either. So, and then once you sober up, you have to do whatever. Go to church. You know what I mean? Start living right. And then you gotta gain people's trust. People's got to trust you again. That means you've got to show them something. And then they've got to trust you enough. You got to find a church that's going to trust you enough to share the word up there. How in the world do we ever get there? You know what I'm saying? I still got the full's still hot. Come on. That's what I'm saying. What I'm getting at is I seen that. He showed it to me, but the hang up was, what's it going to take to get there? That's the challenge. Because a few minutes later, once that revelation's over, you're right back in that world. But there's something lingering in your spirit now. A vision's been dropped in there. And you got to go after it. Now, don't get me wrong, it didn't happen that next day. It didn't happen the next week. I continued trying to stay surviving the way I knew how to survive. But the whole time, these revelations would just keep coming, or revealings of who he is. He just kept visiting me. And this relationship started. You know what I'm saying? The next thing you know, we had a relationship, and I didn't need that. And then next thing you know, I started coming to church. And next thing you know, Sean's like, hey, you want to preach Sunday? And I'm like, sure. And, looking back, I had no clue. But I knew I was supposed to do it. You know what I mean? There was your first time. I did not know. I knew you were supposed to find a Bible verse and talk about it. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying I was called to preach. I'm saying there's a ministry within us. There's a ministry within us. It ain't about standing on the platform speaking to millions anymore. There's a ministry within us to exuberate out of you to the multitudes and just share your message. Share your message, your witness of who he is to them. And you stand confident in that message. You stand confident with authority. You know what I'm saying? Wait, I'm scared to go back to that old lifestyle. I can say that I'm scared to go back because I know his authority and power. I respect it enough to know you don't go back there because of the repercussions. And he loves me so much is he's going to drop the hammer on me if I drop back there. Out of love. And so it's a challenge for somebody to walk out that vision. It was no different with the community center. And I'm giving God the glory this morning. That's what I'm doing. And I'm going to talk about the vision within you. He dropped that vision within me to revive that community organization. And he said, how do you do that? Remember, I'm nobody, I remember it's just weird stuff. What I'm getting at, that was a vision within me. We walked it out and it manifested itself because everything will line up if you walk in that vision. But this verse here, where there's no vision, people would perish. Because if you don't have no vision, you don't have no direction. You don't have no goal. You don't have nowhere to go. You're circulating in the world. This is your world. And there's nothing here but darkness. You know what I mean? When he says you crawl the dust of the earth, on your belly shall the reptile, that means he operates on that ground level. That's where he dwells, is in the earth, in our minds. Anything up out of the dust is a heaven. Up out of the dirt is in a heaven. It's up elevated. If you kind of see what I'm saying, you're out of that place. And there's different places of that. You know what I mean? What is your vision? But what I like about this verse, and this is what really spoke to me about it, and what I want to share here, is this verse here. Somebody might help me. I don't know how long I'm going to stay up here this morning. Is this all right? Is this good? All right. God. Where there is no vision, the people will perish. We can understand that. I don't want to get too excited, but it's within me I see it, y'all. You know what I'm saying? That's why I get excited, is because that vision is alive within me. And I'm saying, hey, we got it, y'all. There's nothing holding us back today from walking that vision out. Them thoughts in our minds that says you can't do whatever, that's going to hold you back, Them thoughts, they're not real. Them are false thoughts. Them are thorns. Them are thorns in your crown. If you can hear that. But the best part, what I really like about this Bible verse here is that second part, because it sets it straight. It's easy to say without a vision the people will perish. But they leave off that part that says, but he that keepeth the law, happy he is. It says many believers are familiar with this verse and they quote the first half regularly, but most are unfamiliar with the rest of the sentence, which applies the vision more specifically to the revelation of the law. In fact, the Hebrew word translated perish is para, or to lose, to loosen, to let go, to let reins go, or to let go unbridled. So it says in this version, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained. But happy is he who keeps the law. Without a vision, people are unrestrained. What that tells me, if I don't have a vision to go after, then I'm wandering, unrestrained to wander wherever I want to go. Whatever, like a horse free in a pasture. I remember that story from Bill Britton. Y'all might remember about them two horses. That story really revelated me. And it was about them two horses in a barn. Sonny, you might remember that story. Two colts in a barn and the owner went in there and one was a little wild and the other one wasn't. And one was jealous that one got to go out in the field and run wild, and the other one had to stay in the stall and be disciplined and eat when the master fed him and drink when he brought water to him and work out on the thing, while the other one got to play in the field all day long and drink from the creeks. And one day when they grew up, that master came and got that horse out of that stall and he hooked him up to the master's carriage and said, "You've graduated to pull this wagon." And that other horse out there that was in the field running wild looked just as good as this other one. He said, "Well, he looks good. You know, why can't I?" He said, "You wouldn't bow down and be disciplined. You wasn't disciplined enough to carry this mission out." And that's where we're at. You know, we've got to be disciplined to carry this thing out. And getting to run around and be unbridled is not something that we're able to do anymore. You know, we have to be bridled and walk that path and keep this law, stay in line with the vision. And it says, in other words, they say we ought to have a vision of the law, that is, purpose and application, because the law sets the standard of righteousness as God's nature. Those who have no revelation of the law are unrestrained, thinking they have the right to sin. Sin is lawlessness. The underlying question is we who have sinned may receive righteous status before God. At the present time, faith imputes righteousness to us. This means that God calls what is not as though as it were. This puts us on a path that leads us to the full manifestation of the kingdom within our being. And this culminates with an actual change from corruptibility to incorruptibility and from mortality to immortality. And we will see later that change will occur when the Feast of Tabernacles is fulfilled. The Feast of the Lord is a basic outline of the prophecy. Now, see, faith imputes righteousness. Just like I said a while ago, the more I believe, the more I have faith. But how does faith come? It comes by them revelations, them revealings, or them intimate times of knowing who he is. When you know somebody, you have faith in them. You have faith in their nature. You have faith they're going to take care of you. Everything. And that faith imputes that righteousness. So what that means is, to me, is the more faith I have, the more understanding I have of who he is, it makes me more righteous, not by some special happening. My nature changes, my way of thinking changes, my heart changes because I have faith in him. See, that's what imputes righteousness into people, is the faith they have in him causes the righteousness to become alive, for them to become righteous. Because you have to become righteous if you know who he is. In them areas, I'm not righteous. I'm not a saint. However, there are portions of my life and my being that he has revealed himself, burned up that part or aspect of it, and has replaced it with his nature. There's a righteous part there. See what I'm saying? So his faith imputes the righteousness. And that culminates with the change of corruptibility to incorruptibility. Exact same concept. Faith imputes righteousness, knowing who he is, and who he makes you more of a righteous person in your minds, in your heart. But then corruptibility to incorruptibility is the same aspect. All your corruption turns into incorruption because you quit doing what was corruptible. I mean, simple, right? Corruption changes to incorruption. But then they want to go deeper with it. Mortality changes to immortality. Now, see, this is where our minds are hard to wrap, my mind, talking to myself, my mind to wrap around this. Because we think immortality, we think we're going to live forever. Now, I'm not going to debate that, and I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But to me, the way God reveals this to me is when mortality changes to immortality. Immortality means there's no death. No death. So you become from mortal, you become immortal. And what that means is no matter if this shell, this vessel, completes its time on earth and does its job, that life that this vessel contained continues to live on. It continues to live on in your heart, in your mind. Our loved ones are still alive today within us. Today. We commune with, we talk to them. Come on. We talk to them. They're alive. And so whenever immortality swallows up mortality, that happens here and here, where we don't think like that. Death has no dominion. See, when we pick up that and we start walking with that, our perception changes of the world. Everything changes. Not to drift off too far. Does that make sense? Mortality, immortality, corruption, incorruption. We're becoming a pure individual. You know, Christ-like is the way to say it. The new covenant faith tells us righteousness comes by faith, because all have sinned and all are therefore unrighteous by nature. So we cannot attain righteousness by doing good deeds to make up for our past sins. We'd be busy folks. We'd spend the rest of our life trying to make up for that probably. So it says, we need a new identity with a clean slate, which comes by being begotten by the Holy Spirit as a new creation. When God revealed himself to you, wherever you was at, whatever the situation was, he dropped something in you, and that new day dawned, and that new creation man come alive. And now he's trying to grow up and mature up. You see what I'm saying? It's not that he needs to mature up. He needs to be bigger in our lives and be the dominant factor. You know what I mean? That's immortality swallowing up mortality. His life swallowing up our lives. So we need a new identity with a clean slate. Thank God for that. Because we operate, or I do, I still go places sometimes and I'm still that same old person. The people that I haven't seen in a long time, you see them, whatever, you're still that same person. They don't know you. I hope she's not listening, but and Rachel will attest that my baby's mama still thinks I'm the same person I was 20 years ago. And it's true. You know what I mean? Nothing in her mind, because she don't know me now. She hasn't seen me in 20 years. She don't know a nature change has took place. She don't know there's a new identity. I'm not talking about, it's everybody. You know what I mean? We all have them people that don't know that new identity has took place. But God is saying, I don't see you as that. I understand why you became that. It's because man fell in the garden and he was cursed. You think I'm faulting you for that? I created that. And I created this, the new man, the new identity. So it says, the new man cannot sin. That's what I have to understand. This new nature within me cannot fault. Do I understand that? He cannot fault because he's been begotten by God. Any sin that we may commit is attributed to the old flesh that was begotten naturally by our earthly parents. If we've transferred our identity to the new creation man, we can say in Paul, like he does in Paul, so now no longer am I the one doing it, but the sin which dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is my flesh. Over the past year, I think it's neat to me to really read Paul's outlook, because he was straight in the trenches. You know what I'm saying? And he was battling, man, and struggling. And he voiced his concern with himself and how much he was lacking, Sonny, in the glory of God. And you know what I'm saying? And what gets me is it was like, Sammy, just think what relationship Paul had with God, and how much he knew him, and the intimacy he had, and how he voiced it in the records, like there's a thorn in my side and how I'm nothing. And he just kept saying, and then the only reason he talked like that is because his reverence for God was so high. And he knew him at such a level that he knew, I am nothing compared to this. And he voiced it out all the time. Like when they was Paul and Silas in the prison. That story set me free at Brother George Polecat's church one night up at Sheepshed. Strange, a revelation of God, right? Who knew I would ever be at George Polecat's church? And I heard God that night in a message about Paul and Silas when they sang and they broke free from the prison. It's a normal song. But if you really think about it, it was people in bondage. You know what I mean? These were leaders of Christ. Paul was out doing God's work, man, and they had him in prison. And it's no different than whenever, come on, if somebody can hear me, a new Melchizedek order rising up in this earth, going out into the earth in modern day saying, hey, this ain't right. This person's not right. Let's bound him up and put him in prison and throw him away the key. And they did that. And what happened is these guys started crying out with a pure heart, a pure worship. Come on, that's it. It's the pure worship started sounding out. A genuine worship from the heart of God came forth, and it busted everything loose. See, that's what I hear. That's what I need within me. I need that cry of pure worship again, Wadey. I need to get to that place where I'm purely, sincerely worshiping God. And let these old chains bust loose again. It is a matter of knowing who you are in Christ, how you identify with yourself. Is the real you the person born of your natural parents, or are you the new entity that was begotten by God? Let me move down here. There are three old questions that philosophers have contemplated from the beginning. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? These questions are important to those who seek purpose in life. To discover that purpose, one must know our origin and God's end goal. God is raising up leaders through whom he will work by his Spirit. Such leaders are relatively few in numbers. Most of humanity will be changed through the ministry of leaders known as ambassadors, where in 2 Corinthians it says, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were making an appeal through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. It says, God's purpose for creation will be fulfilled regardless of sin. God's purpose for creation will be fulfilled regardless of sin. Because God is able to do all things according to his counsel of his own will. His wisdom devised the plan from the beginning. His love for his creation compels him, and his power makes it possible for him to accomplish this. Where he says, I put all things under my feet. But it says, much of the ancient world envisioned a dualistic world. While there is indeed much dualism, such as light and darkness, good and evil, love and hatred, the vision falls short of the glory of God. The dualistic view of the Greek worldview begins with the mixture of light and darkness and ends with their separation at the end of time. The dualistic starts in the beginning when light and darkness coincide. If we can understand these two aspects of the tree of knowledge also, there's light, darkness, good, evil. There's two aspects to the world, dualistic views. It says, and it ends at the separation when they separate again. When there's no, it says through scripture teaches the distinction between light and darkness. It ends with full victory, light over darkness, where Jesus says, I am the world. Today, the children of light are being separated from the children of darkness. But in the end, when he reconciles all things to himself, we will walk in that light. The dualistic worldview was based on the idea that the devil created matter, and for this reason, matter was considered to be inherently evil. They claimed that only spirit was good, and they identified light as being spiritual. So they divided the heavens from the earth, and their religious vision claimed that in the end, heaven and earth would be separated and divorced. But the dualistic assumption made it impossible to reconcile all things to God, if for no other reason, because God could not lawfully claim the physical creation as his own. He could claim only pieces of light that had been mixed with darkness. But this worldview, the end of history, would see heaven and hell, two irreconcilable realms of eternal existence. Let me scoot on down here. It says, while many believe that heaven and earth will be divorced eternally, we know that God intends for heaven and earth to be married in a new covenant relationship. In order for that to happen on a grand scale, it is necessary to first reconcile all things, both in heaven and earth. If we see the model that God has set forth, if we understand the plan of God, we will know how to build his kingdom on the principles of his nature. We have to build the principles of the kingdom on his nature. You know, we used to think we need to do it like with our hands and doing these good deeds and building things and doing that. And one of the to share a little bit on that, you know, I told him, I said, I've seen here recently how The value is not the vision I had in my job. It took me. I knew we had to go out and we had some work to do. But as I've been out doing this work now for the past year, my vision has expanded to where it's not so much about what we're doing now. There's an underlying issue, behavioral health, you know, I, just problems. You know what I'm saying? There's underlying problems that's been around for years and years and years. That's almost the root of some of these things. Is what I'm seeing. And so my vision is no longer here. God's done dropped in my vision to go after that root. You know, so now that's the direction I'm going. Is it, you know, I thought we had hit our deal, but now I want to go after the root of this problem. And that's a whole new world now, you know, a whole new challenge. But I know it's the right thing to do, but now we got to go after it and do it. Because the value is not so much in the material things as it is in, you know, our hearts and our minds. Go down right here one more, Daisy. 21. Having therefore these, we lost it. But you know, that's where my heart's at here right now is that battle that's taking place within me to stay on the road, stay on the path, and to overcome them thoughts every morning that tells me I'm not good enough, or I'm not deserving, or you know, you don't want to face the trouble that you're going to have this week, or them are thoughts that holds people back from reaching them visions. But them are also stepping stones to become an overcomer. You know, them opportunities like that God puts in front of you and to overcome them, to build your faith in Him, to impute more righteousness into you, you know, to manifest itself in ways to make us understand. I think that's the biggest challenge, is me understanding who I am in Him. Because who I am in Him, them negative thoughts don't exist. There's no end to it. Death has no dominion. Sin has no power. You know, what holds me up? Where do I lack? Whenever it comes to understanding who He is. I'll read one more thing here real quick. No, I won't. I'll stop right there. But let's we'll close out early today. Um, the vision. We've got a vision in our hearts. We've all got a vision. And I think to myself, I don't want to look back one day and think, I wish I would have, or I wish you know, I don't want to look back and think, whatever. It's almost like whenever it talks about sacrifices in the Old Testament or whatever, that's what we're called. That's what we have to give ourselves as. And it's not us laying down on something and being burned. It's you actually sacrificing a part of yourself and laying that down as a sacrifice unto Him to turn. You know what I mean? And that's a challenge. But if I can do, I want to do something real quick. And Phyllis, will you play a song for us real quick? But here's something that's on my heart. And it goes that true worship while ago, whenever I said that, God spoke to my, you know what I mean? And I hope that makes sense. But, you know, every Sunday we come here, we do our thing, and we go out, we sing a few songs. But I always said sometimes let's just take a minute and give God thanks. Let's just stop and just take a minute, open our hearts and our minds, like Sonny said this morning, and just receive what He has for us. And I can only do so much up here, but I know them times where you open your hearts and your minds and you just listen and say, "Thank you, God, for loving me." That's where them connections and them relationships really become real. And all of us can think back to them times where I always think, man, that time I was just telling y'all about, whenever I was sitting there with that bag, that was probably one of the darkest times of my life. And for God to reveal Himself in that situation shows, to me, I have to stop and think, man, loves me, loves me. So just let's take a minute. Let's think about them times where God's touched you in them dark places. And just give Him thanks this morning for being there and for being who He is. We're not asking nothing from Him this morning, except let's give it back to Him. So if y'all don't mind, let's all stand. Let's just give God glory. You are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice and say, Lord, I worship you because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice and say, Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Yes, Father, we praise you, Lord, and we thank you, Jesus, because of who you are. Father, we glorify you, we praise you this day, Lord, for all your goodness and your faithfulness, Lord. And you loved us, Lord, when we were unlovable, Father. But you are our Father, Lord, and you love us with unconditional love, Father. Oh, Father, let us find that vision. Let us find that revelation about you, Father, so that we do not perish, Lord, so that we do not stand naked before you, Father, but that we are clothed in your righteousness, Father, when we stand before you, Father. Let us grow in your revelation, Father. And we praise you, we glorify you, Lord. And we thank you for who you are, Lord. For who you are, Lord. Because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I
say a prayer, Lord, for all the people that are struggling with addictions, Father. For all the people, Lord, that are waking up today. As Sammy said, that they've got straws, they've got full laying around all over, Father. Speak to their minds, Lord, and speak to their hearts, Father. And for all the people, Father, that are struggling with sickness, Lord, that we are healed, Lord, that by your stripes we are healed, Lord. Let immortality set in our minds, Lord, as heaven and earth come together, Lord. Because we are that heaven, we are that earth, Lord. And we praise you, Lord, and we glorify you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Praise you, Father. Thank you, Lord. Praise you, Father. Praise you. Thank you.
Take up a church offering. Appreciate that. I just want to give God the glory this morning. You know, He deserves that praise. You know, sometimes it's good just to open our hearts up, just be free in Him. That's the good thing about here. You know, we don't worry about who's sitting next to us or what they're going to go tell their friends. We can just be free in who He is, and He's been real good to us. And I believe that the greatest days we ever seen are right in front of us. That people's going to stand up in confidence and authority. They're going to know their true identity. They're going to be able to walk in this world without hindrances, you know, and be a light to them other ones, brother. Because they see Aaron and they say something's different about him. His nature's changed. He may not be perfect, but he's different. You know, he's got peace in certain areas that he used to not have. You know what I mean? That's the glory. That's the glory, brother. Having peace in good places, man. Peace, the fruits of the Spirit manifested in your life. And people seeing the fruits manifest. Praise God this morning. We'll close us in a prayer, brother.